Morning, everyone. This video is the optional um, case studies. So how it's going to run is I am going to go through three case studies. One that pertains and is focused on Unit 2, one that is focused on Unit 3, and one that is focused on Unit 4. You can do these three and get bonus marks, three of them, upon me going through what you've done and seeing that it's makes sense and it's correct. But this is optional. This is something that you do not have to do. These are for the people that are thinking, I want my mark to look better, and I want to just. I love social so much that I'm just gonna keep doing more social work. There's that as well. There is that few of you out there. Keep in mind, June the 12th is the last day that I'm going to accept any sort of work from any of you. So, also, remember this. On Wednesday, I am going to post your final exam, and you will have the rest of until June 12th to work on it. It's going to consist of multiple choice, short answer, maybe matching, and a long answer, maybe one or two. So that's what it's going to look like, and then you're going to just submit that when you're finished. So if you have a lot of other things that you're working on, like booklets or tests or written responses or projects, and all of a sudden you see this and you're like, oh no, how am I supposed to work on this? Don't worry about it, because this is optional. Don't do this if you don't want to. If you're working on other subjects, then don't worry about this. This is just more for people who have been doing so well and getting things done that they've got time to spare. So, how we're going to do it, I'm going to introduce the three of them to you. The first one comes from Unit 2, so Historical Globalization. It requires me to read through something for you. So, and then I will post it, all the links to the documents on our D2L. The second one, I'll read through it for you. The third one, there's no need to read through it because it's just you're going to watch a short film and then you're going to answer some stuff. Okay, so that's my introduction to you. Let us start. The first thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to focus on a case study of the Silk Road. So we mentioned it briefly in Historical Globalization, Unit 2. We're going to address it today as well. So on the Google Slides, I'm going to post the first slide. At the bottom, there's a YouTube link. If you watch that video, it is a video of the Silk Road. It explains it to you in more detail. I would strongly recommend you watch it. So we're going to talk about the Silk Road. A brief history of the Silk Road. The Silk Road was, exactly by its name, a network, I guess we could say, of routes that connected east to west. So imagine a bunch of trails and pathways and roads set up that would go from Asia and make its way all across to Europe. At its height, the biggest it ever got, it would go from places in Southeast Asia. So we're talking about modern day places like Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, up into China, and then across to Persia, which is now Iran. So we're talking about going through places like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and then going down into the Middle East, so places like Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, a little bit of Egypt, Lebanon, Turkey, and then coming up into southern Europe. So we're talking about Greece and Italy and Spain as well. So extremely long and interconnected. It was established in the 2nd century and would last up until the 18th century. So we're talking extremely vital for the spreading of goods and ideas. So goods made their way along the Silk Road and spread throughout the ancient world. So that essentially is how we got goods to get from one place to another. Things that existed in one part of the world were brought to a place that they had never seen it before, and they were able to experience it, and there was a demand for it afterwards. So you could see things like jade, precious stones from China, making its way to Rome. And then vice versa, Roman marble and glass was brought there as well. We talked about and we watched a video, maybe some of you remember it, where ideas were spread as well. So things like weapons. Probably one of the earliest ones was that the crossbow made its way from China to Europe, but probably the most significant came with gunpowder. So gunpowder was created in China, but made its way into places like the Middle East and Europe, and was used quite effectively as a weapon of war. So not only were goods being shipped across the Silk Road or carried across the Silk Road, there was also ideas. And probably one of the biggest ideas or idea was religion. Religion made its way across the world. So that's why religions like Buddhism, which originates in India, now finds most of its believers in places like China, Korea, Mongolia, and Japan. Or the religion of Islam, which is it originates in what's now Saudi Arabia, but now the most populated Muslim country in the world is Indonesia, which is in Southeast Asia near Australia. So we can see how the spreading of people along the Silk Road and meeting new people, they were exchanging goods, but they're also exchanging ideas. This is probably arguably the birth of globalization, because now you're having people who are meeting each other and they are saying, let's do business. I like what you have. You like what I have. Well, let's trade. And the birth of globalization. So if you'll be following along on this Google Slides, on slide 4, you can see a map that stretches from China, makes its way all the way to Constantinople, which is now modern day Istanbul, in Europe. So goods were making their way across countries now, and it was building up this trade. And some places became powerful in the ancient world because they were trading places. So if you focus really closely, you can see a place called Samarkand, which I believe now is in Turkmenistan. That was one of the biggest hubs of international trade. But now, you probably didn't even know it existed. So you can show you that the ancient world, a lot of people rose to prominence because of this Silk Road. And a lot of people made a lot of money. But there was danger that we must talk about. So these were overland routes. So people are walking it. They are either walking with the goods on their back, or they're going with animals like horses or camels or anything or donkeys to carry the goods. So people were physically bringing these goods across. But one thing that you have to understand is that no one person walked from China and made themselves all the way up into Europe. That's impossible. So what they would do is at certain points along the Silk Road, they would stop and they would hand it off to the next person who would go as well. Now, the more people that got involved, the more money it would cost. So, for example, if I'm a merchant in China and I'm selling my jade I want to bring it to Europe. Well, now I have to get someone to bring it there. So I will hire a person. I'll pay them to go a certain distance. Then I will pay someone else to go to the next section, and so on and so on and so on. That costs money. The more people that get involved, because there's more wages involved as well. It also took a long time to get there, because if I was to walk from where I live now to our school, it would take me a few hours. If I was to walk from here to say Edmonton, it would take me a few days. If I was to walk from China to Iran, it would probably take a few months, because you got to get over the physical landscape, but you can't travel at night. It takes a long time, so the goods are in travel a long time, and it's also dangerous because these routes are well known, and you're carrying precious things or commodities that people want. There are dishonest people, and there are people who would prey on these caravans of goods and attack them, steal the stuff, and probably kill the person who's carrying it. That's why a lot of these big empires that were benefiting from these trade, they set up the part of the Silk Road that was in their territory, they protected. So the Persians, they created what they called the Grand Road or the Grand Highway. I forget the name. It's in the video, and they protected it. The Mughals in northern India did the same thing too, and the Mongolians, when they became one of the largest empires in history under the authority of Genghis Khan, he actually promoted the trade as well, and he protected it, and people who were using the Silk Road. So, what brought the demise of the Silk Road was technology and technological improvements. So the Silk Road kind of did itself in because it was spreading these ideas to different parts of the world, and now when these ideas got there, people ran with them, and they developed things that kind of brought an end to the Silk Road. So inventions and improvements in navigation essentially spelled the end for the land routes, because they created boats that could go out into open seas and open oceans, and allowed them to travel. So now, instead of a person carrying goods on horseback or whatever across these long stretches of the Silk Road over land, they would send ships which could hold twice, 3, 10 times as much as a person could have carried, and bring it back to its place of origin a lot quicker. Yes, there were still some dangers, things like weather and piracy, but these sea routes were a lot quicker and a lot easier to get a lot of goods across. So essentially, with the age of navigation and technological advances in shipbuilding, these overland routes stopped being as important. So if you're following along on slide 7, there's two maps. The map on the right is a map of the Mediterranean, and you can see what ships were now able to do. They could hit all these places a lot quicker than, say, someone having to walk to each one of those places. And then the map on the left should be familiar to us, because this has to do a lot with things like the Columbian Exchange or the Triangle Trade that I talked about, where we're talking about goods going from Europe to Africa, and then slaves moving to the colonies, and then goods. That was all possible because of A, what the Silk Road had done, and B, the introduction of shipbuilding. So the Silk Road can be argued as the birth of globalization. We talked about globalization as the connection between people and the coming together and exchange of goods and ideas. We can use the Silk Road as the base to establish more of, to expand on the idea of globalization. And we just saw right now, if the Silk Road is the base, the next step up would have been the use of ships, the improvement of navigation. We can see from the base the impact the Silk Road had when we look at things like imperialism, colonialism, and the Industrial Revolution. These ideas that shaped our modern world are established because of the Silk Road. These ideas that we had spread. We met new people. When we met these people, unfortunately, the undertone of racism jumped up. They look different. We're better. Racism. So yes, there are some negatives that came with the Silk Road, but a lot of positives. So I would encourage you to watch the video. It's on the first slide. What you're going to do is You're going to use the information from the slides, and you're going to use the information from your notes and the video and anything else that you can to answer the 3 questions at the end of this presentation. So question number 1 is, what were some of the driving forces behind the creation and maintaining of the Silk Road? Question 2 was, how did the Silk Road impact the ideas of imperialism, colonialism, and the Industrial Revolution? And question 3, this one is more of your opinion, and I would love to hear some of your opinions on this. Can the Silk Road be described as the great great grandfather of the internet? Yes or no? Why or why not? So, because this video is getting kind of lengthy, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to make a video for case study 2 and 3 together. So, like I said, this is optional. You do not need to do this if you do not want to. There is no penalty for you not doing this, okay? This is just for those of you that want to, or for those of you that want to just keep doing social studies things, okay? So, I'll see you in the next video I'm going to make right now.